Hello, today we're building a ruined windmill, inspired by the Old Bonegrinder from Curse of Strahd. My plan is to keep it simple and playable. Let's see how that works out. The build begins from the lower part of the windmill. It is made from a Pringles can. First I got rid of the bottom and then cut the can into a roughly 6 cm long piece. It's okay if it's a bit crooked. After all, this will be a ruined building. The inside is slippery from the fried oil sponges that can barely be classified as food, so I tore off the inner surface. Now we have a nice glue-friendly cardboard. The lower level will be made of stone and the rest will probably be planks, but I haven't planned that far yet. I decided to use foam for making the bricks. I cut the XPS foam into thin strips first. And after that I chopped up the bricks. This was actually quite satisfying to do. Good, that should be enough for the entire level. To give these some textures, I used the stones in a box method. Quick and easy. Those are good textures to begin with. Aluminum foil would be another simple texturing option. Time to start gluing. I attached the bricks in many sections by covering a small area with PVA glue and then placing on the foam bricks. This will be an old, partly ruined wall, so we don't need to worry about getting neat lines of bricks. When I cut the bricks, I did not only make them of varying size, but also of varying thickness. This brings great depth to the wall. Laying the bricks will take some time, but this is actually quite enjoyable. I considered to use this method first, but I decided to use the foam. Let's speed it up a bit. I managed to get over half of the wall done in about 10 minutes. Not bad. I think we need a hole, so I cut away an opening here. The ruined theme will make this building better for minis. As a multi-leveled wargaming piece, this has to have a few large openings. There will be no door, but perhaps some rotten wooden beams. We'll see. I placed the bricks over the edge, so none of the cardboard is visible. That should work, and more glue for good measure. An easy way to make the brick wall appear more collapsing is to intentionally place bricks in the wrong way. The following brick you glue on will then have to accommodate. And that's the last brick. I think we got just the right amount of bricks for the base and collapsed stairs. I built those on a small base that I cut out from cardboard. I began by making the stairs. Here I'm cutting up a foam piece into a rough foundation of the ruined stairs. Don't cut towards your hand. I roughed up the piece to give it some shape and textures. I also used the aluminum foil ball for applying textures. The bricks then go on top of the steps and around the stairs. I glued the stairs into place and then started applying bricks. While gluing on the bricks, I thought about a few things. First, how do the bricks stick to my fingers infinitely better than to the surfaces that actually have glue on them? Second, the floor could also have some tiles. So I went ahead and placed the rest of the foam bits as small floor tiles. I glued them on as clusters, covering about half of the floor. Then I put on the walls to make sure everything fits well. A few stones more and I called it done for now. Looking quite good. I haven't done this detailed buildings before and I'm surely enjoying making this so far. Next, this bark flocking will cover the ground. I applied glue on the base, in between every brick. I put the walls on in the same go and then dropped on the flocking. Here, for this, sand and small rocks would be much better, since they would add the much needed weight to the base. There we go. I thought this was still missing something. Bricks, of course. I placed all of my remaining bricks under the collapsed doorway. Now there would certainly be lots of bricks directly under the hole, but I didn't place any there in order to keep the entrance large enough for minis. The building can look a bit odd if it just sticks out from the ground. With a generous application of glue, I applied more flocking around the base of the building. The PVA I'm using is slightly different from the usual stuff I've been using. It's much stickier and somehow it holds flocking in place very well. That's why I don't see a reason to seal this in with watered down glue. Before building any higher, I made a few planks from popsicle sticks. I carved in deep textures with the utility knife. As you might have noticed, I like these exaggerated textures. I glued one of these planks on the floor and the other one standing like this, perhaps part of the destroyed door frame. Because no sane man would attempt to make brick walls on the inside, I mixed a black texture paint for the interiors. The simple baking soda plus paint mix works well for a simple stone wall look. When painting, I didn't have to go for a full coverage. I'll still base coat the entire thing with black. Something like this should be fine. I also hid the cardboard edges using plenty of the paint, just in case I wanna make the levels modular. I then painted the rest with just black. Wasn't brave enough to spray the foam, so I took the slow path instead. Usually one would seal this in with a glue paint mixture, but the Finnish XPS foam I'm using is durable, so there is no need for that, unless you play with toddlers, that is. I did have to repaint some visible surfaces of the Pringles can. It didn't take the paint too well. Alright, I decided to build the upper levels from these popsicle sticks. I began by preparing lots of planks. The way I did this, I got the best textures with these 3 steps. First, make many straight cuts. Then, make more cuts with an angled blade. In this way, some large bits are easily removed, which will result in deep, visible textures. And lastly, snap them into a suitable length. Good, now you have a well-textured piece of worn wood. Before starting with the wood floor, I painted the inside almost done. A support beam would have been very convenient here. Instead, I glued in the planks between the walls. For better playability, the floor will be collapsed, covering about half of the area. And now, like any reasonable man would do, I placed the broken support beam afterwards. Following that, I glued on one more plank here and a tiny one there. Here goes one plank purely for cosmetic effect. That's good enough, minis should fit in here. Well, at least they can be dropped in. What is that? This piece of cardstock is useful for the next step. I cut it into a circle and then, with the help of some hot glue, I made a frame. With the frame in place, it should be easy to glue on the wooden wall. I went ahead and glued on more textured planks. I'm using PVA glue here. The hot glue was just more convenient for getting the frame into place. Now I know this ain't the most realistic way to build, but it gets the job done quickly. Here I left a large gap between the planks. It makes for a great sneaky shooting spot. Then I glued these broken planks on the inside, mainly to work as support. With playability in mind, I planked just a bit over half of the wall. I then worked with these smaller planks with the goal to create a moderately convincing broken-in wall. The trick here is to make everything look as fragile as possible while keeping the build durable enough for play. Poking the wood bits into the foam worked surprisingly well. Up here I placed these splintered bits to go completely around the top, barely hanging in there. I'll reinforce them later. Now that's a good hole, time for a miniature test. Yes, without too much effort, miniatures can be placed inside. Out here there shall be a shaky wooden platform. First I poked in a few barbecue sticks as support beams. These sticks were textured in the same way as the planks. 4 should be enough here. Then comes the next set of support beams. I placed on these and thought this will be fun. I continued by covering with more planks next. Keep in mind, when building shabby things from wood, you can always use scrap splinters to cover up unwanted glue. And as extra detail, of course. And finally, I placed a fallen plank from the wall, and then a few little splintered plank bits. These should add the needed details. While at it, I also glued on more splinters on the wall. Alright, a ladder leads up to the next floor. I built it quickly from barbecue sticks and the usual planks. Now that the path to the next level is on the outside, the floor can be intact. I finished the planking and used plenty of glue here. Once this dries, the hanging planks here will surely stay in place. Some extra glue for good measure. Hey, this might even work. Let's move up to the next floor. I made this floor in a similar way as I did the last one. I used hot glue for the tricky parts again. Always remember to remove hot glue mess if possible. No episode is complete without the sacred oath box. I cut another cardstock ring and hot glued it on top, then started gluing on planks with PVA glue. These planks are much longer, you'll see why soon. To get these pieces easily into place, I used sticky, almost dried PVA glue. Making all of these planks did use up lots of wood. I had to use these wooden utensils for the last couple planks. All in all, this wood construction part took much less time than expected. Great, that leaves more time to figure out what to do for the roof. Okay, the roof can be built directly on the planks, just as long as the top is somewhat flat. This is how I built the roof. I cut out this Pac-Man shaped piece from cardstock, and then glued it into a cone shape. For shingles, I cut out short bits of textured wood. I placed on the shingles with plenty of glue, so they stay in place for sure. The large shingles didn't work too well, so I filled the gaps with leftover bits. I continued by working with smaller shingles. Here I wasn't too concerned about getting nice lines of shingles or leaving behind visible glue. The roof is supposed to be crooked, and perhaps I'll add some flocking on later to cover the mess. I'm just throwing on the bits at this point. This is now quite good. After covering a few gaps, it looked like this. I also glued a stick on top, just in case we need it. Next, I'll figure out how to make the windmill thingy. I began by texturing and damaging 4 long sticks. These were textured on both sides as they are well visible from all directions. I glued the fan blades together with the help of a few shorter sticks. Now I know the blades should be angled, but I just didn't care. Perhaps it's the reason this windmill was abandoned in the first place. With a few more shaky planks, the mill should look at least slightly convincing. I've looked at some images of windmills, and there should definitely be more planks, but let's keep it simple. 1 plank per wind flap is enough. Yeah, I think that looks quite good. To attach it, I used these thicker wood pieces. The hot glue is again mostly used for quick attachment. I'll need to cover and reinforce with more planks. A few bits and plenty of glue should do for extra rigidity. I decided to keep the top floor pretty much as it is. I don't see there being lots of action here. Now in hindsight, I see that a small hole in the floor would have been a nice touch, plus a ladder. These scissors won't do the job, so that'll do. The roof is just placed on. I hot glued some sticks under so it won't slide off that easily. To clean it up, I cut away some visible cardstock here. Yeah, it seems that the roof stays on well enough, and I found a miniature spot. I was wondering how to place minis on top. Fortunately, the problem resolved itself. The elf can now take shots down on the peasants. My sophisticated painting plan was to coat all wooden surfaces with quick shade. This is an oil-based, overpriced version of wood stain that I regret buying, but it's good for this. I brushed on the stain over all plank surfaces, inside and outside. The wood becomes instantly beautiful, and as a calculated bonus, the quick shade seals in all the tiny wood bits. This stain hardens after about a day and leaves a glossy surface. Well, it does that on most surfaces, but not on wood unless it is applied too heavily. With this in mind, I was slightly less messy than usual and tried to avoid pooling, etc. Good, that worked. If the quick shade container was large enough, I could make instant dip-forged buildings. As the usual fool, I didn't have thinner at hand. These wipes of purity will do instead. Rip paintbrush. One day later. Now the wood is still a bit sticky, so I continued by painting the stone walls. I covered all bricks with grey first. Just a heavy overbrush, there is no need to get a full coverage. Then I also painted a few bricks in different shades of brown. So far I've made most of my stone buildings all grey, not this time. After the brown, I also painted some of the bricks with a lighter grey. That should do. Next I dry brushed all of this with a light grey to bring out some textures on the stones. After that I used an off-white. This looks quite good as it is, but I think I'll come back with some washes later. For the ground I used brown, grey and a tan. I believe I'll cover the base with green flocking, but not in this episode because I don't have any, and I'm not gonna use dill this time. It is time for simple washes. I started by darkening the roof using a black wash. I want to make the roof much darker than the rest of the wood walls. While at it, I applied some of this wash on the stone wall and then on a few selected planks. Just a bit here and there, especially here under the platforms. This greenish wash is supposed to create the effect of rotten or aged wood. I also applied this randomly on many spots. On the stone wall I applied it like this, where I imagined moisture would run down from the aged wood. And of course some on the roof as well. Following the washes, I dry brushed the stone walls with a tan. This re-highlights some edges darkened by the washes. Using the same paint, I also worked on the wood surfaces, focusing mostly on the edges. I was almost gonna call this one done before dry brushing the wood. Luckily I didn't. This really did finish the look I was going for. Here we can see some glossiness, but it's not that bad. It's just amplified by the camera. Okay, all done. This turned into a beautiful ruined windmill that will surely get lots of play and display value. Here it is combined with another piece. Thought that looked quite interesting. Now that I'm looking at this, some rusty metal banding would have been a great addition to the piece. Or perhaps some old posts, crates or burlap sacks. I'll think of those in another video where I finish this build with flocking and foliage. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more, and give this video a like if you appreciate the content. Here are a few other videos you can watch next. Good luck and thanks for watching. This build was brought to you by AquaBeast. If my work is of high value to you, consider supporting the channel on Patreon. That means a lot. And a quick announcement, I now have the Bardscraft Bestiary available on Patreon, a 5th edition monster manual for some of the custom minis I've created on this channel.